Hey, welcome to my reader's journal. Today, I'm going to do something different. I'm actually going to do a tier ranking list. I'm ranking the books that I've read in 2024. Most of these are young adult books. I do have a couple children's books that I did read to my class. If you don't know, I'm a teacher, but I'm going to go ahead and rank these. The different tiers that I have. So, the first one, the top one is for me, it's perfection. Does that mean that it is the best piece of literature out there? No. But for me, for my entertainment, for my pleasure, like it gave me what I needed and I genuinely like it for what it is and I don't necessarily want to change anything from that book. So to me, it's perfect the way it is. The next one down is solid read, but it has some flaws. So this one, again, good book, but there's some things that I would like to change to make it better, but still solid read. So the next tier that I have is genuinely don't know how to feel about you, pretty self-explanatory, and then the last one is taking you to half price books, and I'm not looking back. This one is going to be for the books that I genuinely didn't like or simply don't want in my bookshelf anymore. So we're going to start. All right, so the first book on here is We Were Never Here. And immediately I am moving this to taking you to half price books, and I'm not looking back. I genuinely don't like the book. I do have a review out, so if you want to see what issues I had with the book, you can go ahead and watch it. But this book, it's out of here. I don't want it. The second book that I have is Under the Lights. This one, I could easily place it and genuinely don't know how to feel about you because I did give it 3 stars and I'm still on the fence whether I like it or not. But with that said, I am going to be taking it to half price books. Again, not a book that I genuinely want to keep, so I'm going to give it away, even though I did give it 3 stars. Next one, Until Friday Night. This one also going to be taking it to half price books. I think that these first three, I know they're romance books, and I know that I'm kind of in it could seem that I'm in the mood that's like, oh, these books are like romance books are bad. I'm not against romance. Like, I genuinely do like romance books, but the plots in these atrocious. We Were Never Here. You have someone falling in love with a volunteer, a hospital volunteer, and he ends up being the most sketchiest person in the world. And at the end of the book, like I'm gonna spoil it. At the end of the book, he leaves. Like, so at the end of the book, they're not even in a relationship. Like, he leaves and he also asks her to take care of his dog. I'm like, what? Under the Lights, this one, to me, it's that trope of the bad boy having to change in order to like get the girl that he wants and everything. And I just don't necessarily have a fond feeling towards that. Like, I'm more of the person that's like, if I'm gonna see a character change in a book, like I want them to change for themselves, not necessarily for just because they want to get with someone, right? Doesn't matter if they're a boy or girl. It's I want them to change for themselves, and this doesn't really have that. Until Friday Night, this one is Until Friday Night is the first book. Under the Lights is the second book. I did read number two before I read number one. It's not the first time it's happened, but Until Friday Night, I thought that it was very, I guess, simplistic, and I didn't necessarily agree with all of I guess the foundation of the relationship, right? All three of these books, I do have reviews out, so you can go ahead and watch them. Um, but that's the reason why I'm putting them down there, not just because they're romance. The next book that I read in the year was Year of the Reaper. This one, taking this up to, for me, it's perfection. I am actually doing a read right now because I'm going to be doing a review video for it, and I wanted to reread it so I can get like all of my thoughts in, since I read it back in January last year and I'm like, I don't remember a lot of it. But I did genuinely love it when I was reading it. It had me so enticed into the plot. So for that, it's perfection. Next book that I have, Shadow and Bone. So this one I've had in my bookshelf for years. And then I knew the show came out. I watched the show. I dug the show. I liked it. And it got me interested in reading the series. But I did want to give it like space just to make sure that I wasn't like comparing the show with the book and everything. So I did give it space. And then this one, after reading it, it's a solid read, but it does have some flaws. I think this being the first book, it makes a good foundation for what the rest of the series is going to be like. But I think in some areas it has some pacing issues for me, so that's why it's there. All right, so the next one is a book called Dragones y Tacos. In English, it is Dragons Love Tacos. This one, hands down, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's perfection. It is genuinely a really good children's storybook. It has some nice lore into like one dragons loving tacos and also like the reason why they're able to like breathe fire and everything. I thought this was dope. So this is going to perfection for me. Next one I have Beto and Bella llegan a Chile. Also perfect. I don't remember if in this book the two birds are already together at the start or in just the first couple pages they like meet and get together. I don't remember how it started, but it is a really nice story of how you come into a relationship, you're like building your life, but then outside factors make you move and migrate somewhere else. And then you basically have to find a new home, and you basically find a new home, and you have like a fun family with like new people, in this case animals and stuff. But I thought it was just a really nice story. So for me, perfection. Next book that I have, Siege and Storm. This one, perfection. I thought that the character Nikolai, hands down, one of the best characters so far in like young adult literature. One of the best characters I think that has been written. I think because of him, single handedly, this book is perfection. Right? Without him, or if he was written differently, probably would have gone to the second tier. But I think his character, hands down, single handedly, made me enjoy that second book so much more, enough for it to be a 5 out of 5 book for me. All right, so the next book that I have is Juan Verdades, the man who, I don't know if I'm reading that right, but it's the man who never tells a lie or something, or doesn't know how to lie, something like that. This one, again, that was a children's book I read for my classroom. It has a solid storyline about like telling the truth and not lying and stuff like that. I think for me, the flaw that I have with it is part of the illustrations. Because it's a storybook, I do focus on the illustrations as well, and the illustrations are very monotoned in a sense. Like if you're seeing the cover, that's pretty much the same palette that the rest of the book has, and to me, it just wasn't really appealing. Like seeing the book, so that's why it's there. But story wise, it does have a good story. Next one that I have is Don't Say a Word, Mama. Uh, Same thing, solid read, has its flaws. I think for me, it's the same thing where the illustrations, it's just more so like with the people. Like I just wasn't enjoying those illustrations, but other than that, solid read. Also has a solid lesson about making sure you're telling the truth, and also differentiating between like secrets that are good to keep and secrets that are bad. So solid. The next book that I have, that was then, this is now. going up to, for me, it's Perfection. Again, another book that I have a review out for, so you can see all my thoughts. But this one, to me, has such a good lesson for young adults in general, but also young adult males, because it has the lesson of how a lot of times when we are growing up, we tend to like stick with the people that we grew up with, right? Like they're our friends, and then we may feel like, oh, they're our friend, like we need to have their back no matter what. But at a certain point, with certain friendships, if you start noticing that that other person is having like a negative influence on you, that it is fine. It is um for your own like betterness that you give distance to that friendship. I think that that is such a good lesson that a lot of people need to learn. So the next book that is on this list is another children's book, and I don't know if any other teachers have this issue, but saying the name for this title, thank you, Mr. Falker, like I when I'm reading it, I'm just like I'm hoping that none of the kids are like thinking, "Oh, he's saying a bad word," or like, "Does that teacher have a bad word for like their name?" I don't know. This one, I am putting it in the genuinely don't know how to feel about you. It has a mixture of me not liking the illustrations, and then also the teacher's name, like I was just mentioning. Like, couldn't you just put a different name, or am I just not pronouncing it right? Like that's the issue that I have with it. Um, but like story wise, it has a good story. I'm not gonna tell you it doesn't have a good story, but it's also really long. Like one of the things that was turning me off from actually reading it, like to the kids, is like it's a long book for like a storybook, and I'm just like, oh, should have been shortened a little bit. But like plot wise, it has a good plot. But yeah, it's I don't know how to feel about you. Like it's just right there. The next three books that I have are part of a trilogy. It is the Parshas trilogy. I read this trilogy years ago, and then I reread it just this year, and I love this series. I'm gonna be making review videos, so I'll explain it more later on. But this first one, Partials, perfection. It sets the groundwork and foundation for this series so well, and it has like really good characters. And the plot and problem and everything that like it's gravitating towards, I think is so cool. It to me, it's perfection. Next one, Fragments, and I'm also for Ruins. I'm putting solid read, but it has its flaws. So for me, Fragments, the reason why I have flaws with it is kind of in the pacing. This book, it starts having kind of like that road trip kind of storyline, and I think I've just come to learn that I don't like road trip storylines, because to me the pacing is just weird, like for me. And even though like everything else in the book is being done well, and even the events that are happening in the actual like road trip are done well, and I can like enjoy them, I don't know why. It's just that simple thought of like them just being on a road trip going from point A to point B, it kind of turns me off. So that's why it's there. For Ruins, I think the only real flaw that I have with it is at the end it kind of feels like a tad bit rushed. Um, if it had been a little bit longer for Dan Wells to really stretch out the ending, then I think it would have been perfection. But I think the ending does feel a bit rushed for me. The next book that we have is Ruin and Rising. So this one is the last, yes, the last book of the Shadow and Bone trilogy. This one is also going to perfection. I think that this book ended the best way it could, and I genuinely did enjoy reading this book. And I know for the Season Storm, I mentioned how Nikolai was one of the best characters that made that story go up to perfection. I'm not going to spoil what happens to him in this third book. So even though he's not there for most of it, I think that all the other characters kind of picked up the slack, and then the intensity of like the situation really delivered for me. So for me, I think it's perfection. It is possible, I will say, that in the future it could move down to the solid read but has some flaws. But after reading it, I was like, this is a really solid ending. So it's gonna stay up there. The next one that I have is The First to Die at the End. I think that this book could have been really good, and unfortunately for me, it just wasn't. It is still a solid read, but it has some flaws. I, again, have the review out for this book, so you guys can go ahead and watch it so you can see what I'm talking about. But it has flaws that could have easily been like adverted, but it is what it is. The next one that I have, they both die at the end. This one, perfection. There's not a single thing that I would change for this book. If there is, then it's more so just seeing how the book goes from being or having that romance element to just friendship. Like if there was no romance, I think the book would still be just as strong. But I'm 100% okay with the romance element because I think it really was natural to me and it didn't take away from the book. Whereas the first is at the end, that romance aspect, I didn't really like. And again, you can watch my review to see why. The next one that I have is We Were Liars. In the past, it would have been right here. Genuinely don't know how to feel about you. But after this reread, I am moving it to solid read, but it still has some flaws. The flaws are more so that I'm not able to connect to it fully. I think that the plot was done really well, and what really helped me was knowing the ending. So during the reread, I was able to really grasp everything that the author was giving, whereas the first time I wasn't, and I was getting bored and confused, and I wasn't having a good time with it. But this time around, I did acknowledge that it does have like a solid plot. All right, home stretch. So next one is the first book of the Darkest Mind series. This one, to me, solid read, but it has some flaws. I think it was more pacing issues. Like I have the review out for this one, so you can go watch like my thoughts and everything. But I think my main issue with it is pacing. The second one, Never Fade, is generally don't know how to feel about you. This one, it falls into the same trope as Fragments, where it kind of has this road trip element where like the characters trying to get from point A to point B like physically, and like there's a large portion of the book where it's like them just traveling, and I just didn't like it. But I do acknowledge that a lot of the things, plots that were in the book were good, but again, pacing really was an issue with me, and I don't know if I can 100% say like yeah it's a good solid book, or if I'm in the camp of no I dislike the book. I'm like literally in the middle, don't know what to think till this day. So moving forward, the next one is In the Afterlight. This one, solid read. I think the main issues I had with this were what's his name dying. I already forgot his name. This is why I make the videos, because I forget things. Um, but the brother of Liam, him dying, spoiler by the way, but him dying was really like not impactful to the story, and I don't see a reason why it was done. So that to me was an issue. And then I think just like the final couple, like, well, not couple, but like, I want to say the final like 50 pages were like rushed. So those are the flaws that I have with it. The last book that I read in 2024, the last one, is Dark Eden. This one, I'm going to be publishing a review video coming out June 10th. And this one, honestly, where did I put it? I think it's right here. Generally don't know how to feel about you. If I remember correctly, I gave this 3 stars. And so to me, that's like, again, I'm very neutral, don't know how to feel. It has a solid premise. Like, I genuinely like the premise and I like the events that happen in the book. The issue that I have with it is the execution. Like, execution wise, I think there should have been different narrations. I think that different mystery elements should have been like hinted at and dropped in like more throughout the book. Because one of the issues that I have is that the whole book happens, and then there's this like just big dump of exposition right at the end, like basically explaining everything that happened. So to me, that is something that I didn't like, but I can also acknowledge that a lot of like the actual story, like when you just think about the story, I did like. So I don't know how to feel about it. That's what's there. But yeah, that is, well, this is my ranking of the 23 books that I read in 2024. I have just 3 books that I'm taking to half price books. Gonna get my $1.50, but we're good. We're solid. If you enjoyed this ranking video, go ahead and leave a like. If you've read any of these books, go ahead and leave a comment on which ones you read. Any books that you would recommend me reading, now knowing like which ones like to me were perfect. Like, are there any that are like, oh, he should probably read this one because he would probably really like this one. Um, so yeah, go ahead and subscribe to see my future videos, and that is all. Thank you so much. Till next time.